Want to get the most out of your strategic workforce planning process? Add talent acquisition to the mix. Hi, I'm Mark Walker. I'm the head of member services from i4cp, and this month's talent acquisition next practice monthly series featured Amy Richman, head of global talent acquisition for Pitney Bowes, and it was fantastic to hear their story as they're thinking about how they evolve their talent planning process. We really started with a picture of their 4 business units, how they've grown through acquisition, and how their organization is really evolving based on the disruption and change in the marketplace. It really has huge talent implications for how they're thinking about sourcing future talent and how they're going to drive measurable impact overall. We polled the participating organizations that were in today's call and heard some very interesting things. Number one, there's some good work happening in terms of the actionable outcomes from their strategic workforce planning processes, both near and long term. However, we see some opportunity within organizations where there's not as much of talent acquisition involved in strategic workforce planning. And I'm going to give you some insights as to why that should change as you are moving your plan forward. Amy laid out from Pitney Bowes' perspective, what's the overview of talent planning? What's its purpose? How are we going to, really drive strategic intent and measurable outcomes? And this exercise has been huge in not only getting business leaders to lean in, but thinking differently about why total rewards, talent acquisition, learning, DE&I all need to come together to think about this different roadmap of what existing talent we have, what's the gap that we have, and how can we source talent that's going to drive those future outcomes. Amy shared the PESTLE model as a framework that they are using to really align their business needs to the talent needs and initiatives that they have going on. And it really, I think, grounds their work to make sure that they're having the right conversations from HR to the business. And it leads to some very specific frameworks and tools that Amy shared with the group and said, hey, when you're working on scenario planning, there's some practical conversations. It doesn't have to be high tech. It doesn't have to be, over engineered to get at the real meat and potatoes of what has to happen. And again, we appreciate that not only was it practical from a question standpoint, but there's a timing element that Amy fully admitted that they had wrong, that they needed to ultimately shift and say, if we move our talent planning process prior to budget reviews, we're going to have a more meaningful discussion and actually be able to fund more of the innovative and impact laden approaches that they can drive with talent. And so we start to see some change in terms of how they're thinking about their workforce planning schedule. She also shared that this model doesn't change overnight. Ultimately, this was an experience that she shared that started in 2018 and continues through today. And ultimately, it has some core exercises, some training and development around their own TA and HR personnel, alignment to the business, as well as getting to that point of how does Workday or a HRIS really enable some of the future movement of this. The last thing that I will tee up was Amy had a rich perspective around the interdependencies in the talent ecosystem and how we need to think differently around almost this agile HR organization where, again, we're coupling together talent acquisition, because they know the sourcing, the understanding of what talent and baseline capabilities are and how to identify those. The learning people, how do you grow it? The total rewards people, in terms of where are we thinking about that bridge and both short and long-term incentives. The DE&I people to really think more broadly around the diverse, unique levels of talent that we need to have throughout the organization. And once you wrap this all around, you start to see the impact that you can make in an integrated talent management approach. And so we love the idea of this model in communicating that richness of interdependencies that the organization can have. So with that, I'll thank you for taking time to experience some highlights from our Next Practice monthly call. We do these weekly for Chief HR Officer, then rotate to Chief Learning and Talent Officer, then to DE&I, and then lastly is the Talent Acquisition Group. I'll also tee up that we have our upcoming virtual conference in November on Next Practices Now for several days. And then in March, we move to an in-person conference in Scottsdale, Arizona. I hope to cross paths on several levels and look forward to the next time that we hear what's critical on your plates and how we can help you sort that out. Again, I'm Mark Walker, Head of Member Services from i4cp. Be well.